Welcome to the Sip and Scale podcast, where we talk about everything business, entrepreneurship, and startups. My name is Blendy Mariki. I'm the CEO and founder of Delegate.co. Each week, you'll join us as we talk with industry experts and business owners, sharing actionable insights to drive your business forward. So grab your favorite beverage and let's sip our way to success. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Sip and Scale podcast. Today, we have a special guest, Gregory Laskody, the principal of Haut Commercial Real Estate. With decades of experience working with major industry players like Deloitte, Wells Fargo, Greg brings an unmatched market knowledge and financial insights to the South Florida market. He's held numerous high-level designations, including Certified Commercial Investment Member, and has led as the 2020 President of the Florida CCIM chapter. If you're looking for deep real estate expertise and valuable insights, this conversation with Gregory is one you won't want to miss. Welcome to the Sip and Scale podcast, Greg. How you doing today?
I'm great, Blendy. Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be here and excited to talk about a lot of cool things that are happening in the space right now.
Yeah. Well, before we dive into that, give me the roots of your career, where you started. That way we have our listeners have an idea of your background story.
Okay, that sounds great. So I've been in the commercial real estate game for about 35 years now, and I got there totally by accident. I was an accounting major at Florida State University, and after failing the course twice, I took an intro to real estate class for only to boost my GPA. And about 2 weeks into the course, I loved it so much, I decided to change my major and pursue it as a career. Since that time, I've been involved in a little over $3 billion worth of transactions as a MAI appraiser, a broker, a lender, a private commercial real estate advisor and broker, an expert witness testimony, and in property tax appeal. So done a lot of things over those 35 years. And right now, what I'm focused on is the launching, and we're gonna fold this in on some of the other topics that I think we're going to cover today. I'm in the process of launching a new tech platform. It's going to be an online community geared solely towards commercial real estate professionals. That's it. That brought me to this podcast this morning right here with you now.
Wow. It's interesting. I see this happen a lot of times with people that are just industry leaders, that they've went into a certain profession, they've learned the trade, and later on in their career, their focus is giving back. Tell me a little bit about how it was back in the day when you were in the real estate scene. Did you have that support network where people that were in the profession for, let's say, 30 years were there to help you? You starting this new initiative, is it a matter of you giving back? Is it, because there were people in the past that would help you and mentor you? Give me the roots of why you're starting this initiative now.
Okay, great question. I'm glad you asked it. And I'm not going to lie. Part of it is entrepreneurial, but a bigger part and the driver behind it is the giving back. To speak to the first part of your question, no. When I got in the business over 30 years ago, I initially started as an appraiser, and then I went over into lending and then became a broker. It was extremely territorial. It was very competitive. I've had experiences where I've caught other brokers going through my garbage can at night when they thought I was not in the office, to people locking their drawers in their offices when they went home. Now it's a lot more communal. It's a lot more shareable, where people are more interested in helping out. And as that impacted me personally, that was a result of COVID. When COVID hit and we were all on lockdown, in an industry like real estate, where your bank account and your book of business is directly related to your ability to network and forge relationships, it was tough for a lot of people. So during that period, I put together a special networking group for young people that were either coming out of college or entering into the business, or that just got in and didn't know how to handle this new paradigm that we were dealing with. And in less than a year, that went from 0 to about 120 members. It was totally free. We met one time a week on Zoom, and I would invite other speakers, much like you're doing, that had expertise in the field, with the same kind of posture where, hey, if I'm in the space and I want to get in, or I want to get better at my game, how do I do that? Where do I go? How do I get the skill set? Who do I need to talk to? So bringing that all full circle is the ability for me to do this in the platform, which offers a wide array of educational content, networking, job job placement, deal positioning. You can list your transactions on the site for free. There's a membership fee, of course, but we're not getting into anybody's pockets and we're not doing any commission splits. So mostly the driver behind that is to give back. And, had I a mentor, and I do mentor a lot of people, a lot of young people, aside from the brokerage business and from the Master CRE platform, but that just didn't exist back in my day. So more than anything, it is a way of me giving back and help.
That's awesome. Going back to like the territorial comment you made, I recall being like a resident manager in the building that I lived in years ago and brokers coming to see apartments. And now I would leave the door of the apartment that was on the market unlocked. And I would tell them just leave it unlocked as it's empty and brokers are coming in and out. And
you're doing this in New York?
This was in New York. Well, it's
okay.
It was an empty apartment. There would be like a round of brokers going in and out, some of which they still needed a key to the building, right? And what would happen was we would explicitly tell the brokers, like, leave it unlocked because there's another showing in 30 minutes after this one. And guess what would happen? The brokers would lock the door after they would show the apartment so that no
other brokers can get in. Yeah.
No other brokers could get in. So I definitely can understand that, like, territorialness, the competitiveness, and it's at a disservice of young people that are getting into the business that need to learn and they want mentors to be there to show them the ropes. I like to say other brokers that I've worked with and done transactions with in the past, they say there's enough food to go around for all of us. And it's true. If we can help each other, I think everybody's set up for success.
I couldn't agree more. And you do get what you give. So.
Yeah, 100%. In terms of, you've touched a lot of aspects of real estate. I'm curious about the appraiser side of things. Like, you started off having to do these inspections. What did you learn in the early days from going through the motions with that side of the business that has impacted how you look at your relationship now with clients and dealing with transactions? Because I feel like a lot of brokers, they start off strictly as they're selling properties from the get-go.
Right. Well, appraisal is where it all started for me. Okay. Yeah. Well, there was a little bit of a precursor to that in that I got my bachelor's degree from FSU, which at the time was a top 10 nationally ranked real estate school, as it remains today. But I knew while I was there that I was going to, at least in the beginning, pursue a career in appraisal. And it was one of the better things that I did do early on, but only because of the learning ground that it provided. One day I might be working on a 200-unit apartment complex. After I would finish that, a golf course would come up or a multi-story office building. So early on in my career, I got exposed to a lot of different property types, which is interesting because we kind of live in a space where they, meaning the market, they want to put a dog tag around you and stick you in a box and put you in a niche on a shelf. That's Blendy, the asset manager guy, or that's Greg, the office equity guy. Very hard to get educated and experienced in a lot of different property disciplines and types. So the appraisal kind of opened the door for me. But since we're speaking about that aspect of the career, it got a little bit monotonous and a little bit tedious for me. I prefer to have a nice balance of interacting with people and spending some time behind the computer, geeking out on Excel or whatever. Appraisal was a little bit too detailed, a little bit too monotonous for me. But look, they serve a role in space. The industry needs them. So it was a great place for me to cut my teeth. But after I got designated, I was ready to move on.
Definitely. As you've moved on, I'm sure you've seen like a lot of different cycles, downturns and whatnot. Maybe you have some insights, because right now we're seeing some downturns in areas of the country. There's always real estate cycles, as you're aware. What have you learned from your experiences over the last 30 years, having seen different real estate cycles in Florida, around the United States? And what advice would you give to first-time investors, as well as brokers that may be, seeing a potential downturn coming soon?
Okay, let's take that one, starting with residential. Residential is much more of a herd mentality, and it's mostly dictated by two things: supply and demand and interest rates. So if you have low interest rates but very little supply, your prices are probably still going to stay high. But if you can continue to add inventory to the market or make more inventory available and the interest rates are low, then it becomes a lot more of an affordable, stable, predictable market. Depending on what area of the country you're in right now, you might be in a great shape like Southeast Florida is in my market. All markets have slowed down over the past 24 months, ever since Uncle Jerry at the Fed decided to first start raising rates in the third quarter of 2020.
Yeah.
We found ourselves within 6 quarters after that at almost triple the base interest rates that were in place before he started the raising. So to a certain extent, yes, the interest rates impact both the residential and the commercial. With commercial, I would be very leery, Blendy, of anybody that just kind of throws everything into one lump basket and says, oh, commercial's doing terrible or commercial's doing great. That's not necessarily true. There are times when apartments and multifamily will outpace retail that will maybe not be doing as well as office or industrial. Right now, what I can tell you is that based on supply and demand factors, interest rates, and all the things that go into the general commercial real estate and investment market, apartments were kind of like the darling child, as was industrial over the last, I want to say maybe 24 months. Office is clearly having its problems, and that was induced by the pandemic with everybody experiencing this work from home phenomenon. A lot of the landlords and hence the tenants want the employees to come back to the buildings to justify the cost and the overhead of the space. And there's a real war going on there right now. And I think it comes at the cost of collaborativeness and contribution. It's a lot harder to be maximally effective if you're removed from the environment where your team or the rest of your coworkers are. Probably not a very popular statement, but I have noticed that generationally, it's more of an issue with younger people than it is with boomers and maybe some of the older folks. As that relates to, I think, did you have something also about how that parlayed into getting into the industry, either from an ownership perspective or investing, or am I getting ahead of myself?
We're not there yet, but I do want to make a comment on the dynamic with working from home versus within the office. You
Right.
mentioned it's very much generational. And I 100% agree with you. I think that it does come down to habits, whether it's work habits, commuting habits, and you had a whole swath of people that they just entered the workforce or recently entered the workforce post-COVID.
Right.
And so maybe they went to college, they finished college in COVID where they're at home doing their studies from home, finishing their tests from home, and then you throw them into the workplace and that is also from home. It's hard to break that habit. So I'm 100% with you versus
You're making a great point.
the people that worked from the office for 10 plus years. It's a lot easier to say, okay, guys, it's time to go back to the office now.
Yeah.
So definitely it's a huge issue, not just for companies. I mean, I see it myself within my company.
Yeah.
We're fully remote and there are major benefits to that. But
Absolutely.
there are times where, I think collaboration does get negatively affected because you can't just go run into the office of your colleague and hash out an issue. In that sense, there are some negative effects. And then on the other side of it, it affects the real estate market. What I've seen in terms of the real estate market, correct me if I'm wrong, that part of the market that have been affected the most are your much older office buildings, the ones that were built in the 70s and 80s versus the newer office buildings. Those, there's still good demand for it because of amenities, updates that they have, so on.
You're correct. You're spot on. We call that functional obsolescence in the appraisal world. If you have a building that was built in 1970 or 60s or the 50s or even the 80s, if you need a higher roof line, you can't change that. If there's no room to run ducts for an improved HVAC system, you can't fix that. So if there's an exception right now, Blendy, that I'm seeing to the office market, it would be for Class A to maybe Class B plus buildings that are less than maybe 10 or 20 years old that are located in major CBD, central business district, urban core markets. Those are doing fairly well. But if you've got maybe let's say a mid-rise or something even greater and you're out in the suburb, you don't have a business where you're relying a lot on employees, you're going to have some vacancies. And then that begs the question, what can be fixed? In my market, we typically go along arterial spines, meaning that in Southeast Florida, it's like one long strip of land, right? And you've got some interstate and highway systems and then major east-west routes. The parcels that are located or front along those roadways have a lot more conduciveness or propensity to be redeveloped into something else. But if you're you're in a rural location and you've got a 25 or a 50,000 square foot office building and everybody's working from home, you have a big problem on your hands. Also, we were talking about property types earlier. Industrial was really hot, and I still think it is. But generally, over the last 24 months, everything has kind of cooled down a little bit due solely to the interest rate. And even though this past week we had a 50 basis point cut, that's not going to do enough to avoid what we call in the industry negative leverage, where the cost of your capital is greater than the return that you're making.
Yeah, it's still too expensive.
Yeah, if you're going to buy a property at a 5 cap, but it costs you 7% interest only or 7% mortgage constant to buy that property, and you don't have significant upside over your holding period, your leverage is working against you. We're still seeing a lot of that now, and it's going to be a while before that goes away.
On that note, are you seeing that investors are looking at the distress now that there are, for example, in the office space, there are properties out there going on sale, they're somewhat distressed. Are you seeing a lot of movement in that area, at least in South Florida?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm glad you asked. As it relates to office, you're either a owner that's distressed or you're a lender that you've got distressed loan on your books. Previously, in 06 to 08, when everything got off the rails, we were seeing a lot of asset managers and special servicers kind of like hoarding onto the property just to generate fees and keep that servicing income coming in because it was so messy and so ugly, they couldn't see an end on the horizon. Now that we've gone through that cycle, this time what I'm seeing that's different is the asset managers are either trying to work it out. A lot of them are still doing a little bit of pretend and extend where, for example, the mortgage is at, let's say, 6%, and they have to lend the money at 8% to be in the money on their books. They're saying, look, we'll extend you for 6 months. Maybe things will get better. Maybe the economy will change. So a little bit of can kicking involved. The ones that are getting proactive are the ones that are either selling their notes at a discount, meaning the banks and the lenders, the ones that are the mortgagees in the equation. The distressed owners are either selling or they're trying to do a workout or a restructuring with their lender so that they can either keep their limited partners happy or their investors, their co-equity partners happy. But I think as it relates to the cycle being somewhat of a roller coaster, we're probably at the apex right now. And the only thing that's holding the car from tipping all the way down is the election right now.
Yeah.
Everybody, when you're in an election year, a lot of people get nervous about making big decisions. And at the risk of not getting too political on this, nobody's going to argue that this is probably one of the most important elections in our country's history with regard to where we go from here. So when you take the magnitude of that and match it up against, well, do I unload this $20 million building? Do I declare bankruptcy? Do I try and work something out? Do I put a group together and buy the note from the lender at a discount? There's a lot of different shell games and strategies that can be played, but people's fear about where we're going over the next less than 60 days is kind of brake pumping that a little bit. At least that's what I'm seeing.
I've seen that myself. I'm active on X and Twitter, and there's discussions on there from commercial real estate folks and even folks outside of real estate. They're managing startups. In addition to that, companies that are looking to, add employees, add new vendors to their list. They're all waiting for this election outcome because there's a lot of uncertainty. There's uncertainty in taxes. There are initiatives being brought up to tax unrealized gains. And so I do understand why a lot of people in this market are looking to just waiting and seeing, okay, let's wait until the election is over.
Yep. It's interesting times indeed. But one thing that our industry really does rely on is constant change. One thing about this industry, and I think it holds true for whatever role one plays in it, whether you're a broker advisor, an asset management or property manager, a leasing agent, a lender, it's in a constant state of flux. And the ones that, that can move with the change in times and move with the uncontrollable variables the most successfully are the ones that are going to win. One, going back to what you said earlier, giving some advice to the younger people, if you're going into it because you're looking for safety, stability, and security, find another industry because that does not exist in commercial real estate.
Yeah. Are you under the impression, like your philosophy is that real estate, big picture, is an area of investment for wealth creation or wealth preservation? What's your philosophy on that?
I like that. A buddy of mine once told me, he said that if you're an investor, you're either an accumulator or a preserver. It's very hard to do both. And like everybody else, everybody that's involved in the game is going to have their own personal take on it. Mine, since you asked, is that I don't see a better way to create not just wealth, but generational wealth. If that's something that you have a family or children or grandchildren, and you're interested in leaving a legacy behind, very difficult to do that with a bond portfolio or a stock portfolio for the simple reason that, one, there's so much out of your control. Real estate you can control. Not liquid, not anywhere near liquid as bonds, stocks, and mainstream investments are. But you have the ability of employing great leverage. You have certain tax considerations that you just don't get in other investment vehicles. So if somebody were to say to me, hey, how do I get into this and what's the best way to create wealth as quickly as possible? It's kind of like that old joke, Blendy, right? Like, what's the quickest way for me to become a millionaire? Well, start with 3, right? Start soon, start now, and start small. You think that, I can't get into a $10 million apartment building or a $30 million industrial asset. Well, guess what? Most people can't. But some people can get enough money from their friends, family, doctors, lawyers, Indian chiefs to go out there and buy a small condo in a brand new building, or maybe a moderately brand new building that's located across the street from a college campus, or from an employment center or a demand generator. There are ways that you can get into the industry that way. Most of my clients that have done it either started young and they had the ability to raise equity. They had the ability to be convincing to people that had money, and everybody was willing to take a shot, right? They were willing to ask for the money. The investor was willing to make the investment in them. And sometimes it just comes down to the issue of great timing. If you're in the right place with the right time, the right people behind you, and the right money, you can do okay. You can do real well. Yeah. So I think that even whether it's residential or commercial investing, it is the best way to create wealth over a long period of time. It's not a get rich quick industry, but then again, very few things are. So,
do you think that one of the biggest mistakes real estate investors make early on when they're first starting out is not developing the skills first of looking at deals, analyzing deals? Because I see a lot of times the really investors, they start off working for people that are taking the risk, right? They're able to get their feet wet before they actually start investing themselves. Is that something that you recommend for mentees, people that you advise to, like getting their feet wet first before they start taking risk and putting money into any form of real estate?
Yeah. So I mentor a lot of young people. I call everybody that's younger than me a kid, but I mentor a lot of young people that are between the ages of 18 and 30. Okay. And I tell them 2 things. There's about a 90 to 92% chance that by the time you're 30, you're going to be married. And there's like an 85 or an 83% chance that you're going to have at least 1 kid. When you get to that stage, you can't throw in the towel and say, hey, I'm going to be a fighter, I'm going to sell pharmaceuticals, or I'm going to be an astronaut or a WWE wrestler. You've got to have your train on the rails. So the people that are the most successful in those early years of their career formation are the ones that do the following things. One, they find a way, to get the skill sets. What do I mean by that? Harkening back to the earlier part of the discussion where we were dealing with, brokers crawling through garbage cans and locked desk drawers at night, there are a tremendous amount of resources currently available right now through YouTube, the internet, a lot of these colleges that have accredited programs. There's a whole environment out there for you to get free or low-cost education, training, and areas where you can develop skill sets. One of the things that I developed early on was a passion for and a complete grasp of the numbers. And by the numbers, I mean mastering Excel. Unlike people, the numbers never lie. So whether I was hired to put together a $40 million capital stack for a client or appraise a 100,000 square foot office building, everything came down to the numbers. So if you don't understand the numbers, if you don't understand the relationships between the metrics, And if you can't convey that accurately and concisely in the form of being like your own Excel analyst, you're going to struggle. It's going to be hard to really know if a deal makes sense. And Blendy, you have seen plenty of these guys out there. They're on the internet. They're hawking their snake oil flavor of the day
Yeah.
about how you're going to make a lot of money getting into real estate. I guarantee you 99% of those guys don't know the difference between a cap rate and a yield rate.
Yeah.
And if you don't, that's okay too. But my point is there's a lot of ways that you can find that out within 3 seconds. The second thing I would say is that what young people think that they might lack in experience, knowledge, or relationships, you can far than make up for with great attitude, showing up, giving 110%, act as if. If you want to be that private fund portfolio manager, act like that. Be aware of what you post on social media. Be aware of how you dress and how you carry yourself. You're making an impression that people are going to form an opinion of within the first 3 seconds. Try and make it as good as you can. That showing up on time, I can't remember who it was. They credit George with saying this. I think it might have been somebody else. But the saying goes, 95% of life is just showing up.
Yeah.
Show up hard, bring your best game, bring your every day, and just try and be better tomorrow than you were the day before. If you do those things, you will go a long way in a short period of time.
Yeah. Boils down to consistency as well.
Absolutely.
I see this. I lived in New York City a very long time. I've met my fair share of brokers and agents.
Yep.
And the ones that are the most successful are the ones that decide that have been doing it for, let's say, 10 years straight. And, they ate dirt for the first few years. And, it's just beating on your craft until something comes up. And you just have to be real. You have to be a believer that you're going to have momentum, and then a win streak from that, something that you can be proud of. A lot of people just quit too soon.
Yeah, that's a great point. In fact, I've seen a lot of really good, smart, talented, gifted people leave the industry because they just got so frustrated. If residential is a little bit different, where you can make money in a shorter period of time, probably not as much, maybe more, depending on how you go about that. But commercial is a long, slow game. And I tell people, look, if you really want to do this, if you want to get into investment sales and capital, like with what I do, you're not going to smell money for 12 to 18 months, maybe longer when we're in squirrely markets like the one that we're in right now, being an election year.
Yeah.
The other thing that I would comment off of what you said, a lot of people ask me, well, do you have to really be good at gabbing and talking, or do you have to be great at Excel? No, you have to be, and you don't even have to be that smart. You have to be great at execution. You have to be able to know your limitations as a human being, work around those, develop your strengths. Nobody wants strong or weaknesses. Develop your strengths and farm the weaknesses out to somebody else, like a VA company or like Blendy's team. But focus on doing what you're really good at, get better at it, and always, always, always execution comes first. You can be the smartest guy in the room. You can have the best spreadsheets on the planet, but if you can't execute and pull the trigger on your plan, it's all meaningless.
Oh man, that's a fantastic point. We work with a lot of different businesses, real estate companies as well, startups. Yep. And we always have, like, in your business, an ideal customer profile of a client you're with. Our ideal customer profile is someone that has that consistency, that knows what they're great at. They're very consistent with that. And whatever they're not so great at, they know that they need to delegate to an expert or someone that knows that side of the business better.
Right.
In your case, as you've progressed throughout your career, how has building a team and building systems changed the way your business functions and led to your personal and professional growth?
Okay. That's another good topic. So from early on, I was interested in and excited about technology, right? Computers, what can you do with them? All that stuff. So back when I got into my career and I was doing appraisal work, we would have, oh gosh, back then it was like Lotus. I don't even know if Excel was even around. But we would have all these different, very mundane applications that or environments that we would do certain aspects of the job in, and then move into different environments to do other aspects of the job. What I'm seeing now, and I'm using this for the platform of my master CRE community, where everything is all under one roof, where you're getting these integrated enterprise SaaS type platforms where you can, if you know what you're doing, and if you don't, you can farm it out. But if you know what you're doing, you can basically design a process that automates a good deal of your daily practice. And one thing that I see, there's not a lot of people in my space that are doing that, both commercially on the commercial side or residentially. Commercial has typically been about 30 years behind the curve on resi, right? If I'm a resi broker and I have a house, by the time you sign my listing agreement, I'm going to have blendyshouse.com for sale up and running. All the brokers in my community, it's going to be on the MLS. And within an hour, I'm going to start getting calls. Commercial, it's not like that. You got to put an offering memorandum together. You got to collect market rent. You got to get land comps, improved building comps, rental comps, yield comps, cap rate comps, interest rate comps. You have to get all this market intel, aggregate it, weed it out, use your subjective judgment to decide which one is most reflective of not just the value you're going to assign to that asset, but the capital behind it. It's an extremely tedious, archaic, and non-systemized process. I have something entrepreneurial that I've developed, and some of the bigger firms, the national firms, will have their versions of that. But I think that you either have to develop the technology and automate as much as you can, or you have to call somebody like you and have those aspects VA'd or farmed out third party.
Yeah.
Again, you want to try and assign a time value per hour to what you're worth. And you're much more valuable analyzing deals, getting people to market, transacting than you are putting a flyer together or maybe making an email blast or something that can be passed off to somebody who has a lower cost per hour value on the skill set that they bring.
Yeah.
So it's all knowing your role and knowing your value.
Yeah. I look back, there's a venture capitalist. He was on a podcast and he made this excellent point that in business, you have different levers. So there are people that use human capital as a lever. There's financial, we use that, whether we go to a bank, we get a loan, we use that as a lever to create wealth. You have technology. If you utilize technology and minimize your workload, now you free up your time to do very high level tasks and responsibilities. A lot of people, if they're able to maximize their time effectively, that's a lever for them to grow their wealth and their professional careers. So this is great. One note I made here, you were talking about residential versus large commercial investment opportunities. I think one of the reasons that technology is a lot more forward thinking in the residential space is because it works off of volume and speed. And so in that area, you need to be forward thinking, be able to get deals done faster, because you're not working off of a 2-year sales cycle. You're working off of a 30-day sales cycle.
You're
Am I right there?
spot on. You nailed it. Absolutely. The market on residential has demanded the velocity that you're addressing. What's interesting is that it's also on the commercial side, but there hasn't been real critical mass in attaining that. So you have boutique specialists like me and maybe some others throughout the country that have really learned how to leverage that technology. But getting the overall market to embrace and adopt some kind of standardized version of that, it just hasn't happened yet. So those commercial brokers, speaking to the younger people that want to try and get into the industry and align with the right mentor or the right team or the right employment situation, take a look at their technology. Look at what they're doing that the competition isn't, in order to be first of mind and first to execute. If you can locate that in your market and you've got somebody that's doing that or a firm that's doing that, that's huge. You're way ahead of the curve just with that.
You're bringing up a good point about, obstacles to entry, different ways that people can take advantage of technology. One thing that has come to development is this NAR settlement.
Okay.
How is that changing the landscape for people like you, brokers in the residential space? Are you seeing an exodus of brokers in the real estate space because of the settlement? Maybe you can speak a little bit to that.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
maybe potential brokers that are trying to get into the business that are like, oh, I'm hearing such, things about this settlement. Maybe it's not worth for me to get into this business right now.
Okay, let me address the far easier part of that. And that easier part speaks to the commercial side of the business. The impact on commercial isn't really going to be that big because the focus has always been more on residential. The reason for that is because it's a much more public activity. If you look for a home now, you can find it on Redfin, Zillow, the realtor site. So when you're dealing with public, the government's responsibility, whether you want to believe it or not, is to protect the public from the public. Conversely, on the commercial side, you're dealing with the presumption that everybody in the game kind of knows what they're doing. If you're going to buy a $5 million apartment building or a $20 million shopping center, you have the experience, the knowledge, and the ability to understand what you're getting yourself into. So the suit was more because of protecting the public and from predatory residential brokers. So the reason for the suit came about because some homeowners got together and they were upset because they didn't feel that the commission aspect of this was transparent enough. The commissions for both the buyer broker and the seller broker would always be listed in the MLS, but it wasn't a situation where the buyer had any influence on the commission structure that was going to be paid. It was all dictated by the seller. Yeah. That got classified as antitrust, somewhat monopolistic, because the buyer, who was a party to the transaction, didn't really have a say in what the fee was. So this is going through the NAR reached a $418 million settlement, which really, I saw a statistic today that it came out to like $352 for every person that is named in the lawsuit.
A lot of lawyers made a lot of money off of that.
They always do. The lawyers get paid first, and Shakespeare was right, what he said about the lawyers. But so offers of broker compensation are not going to be allowed on MLS any longer. Real estate agents that use the MLS are going to enter into written agreements with buyers before even bringing them on tour. That's going to be a problem, because if I'm buying a house and now I'm going to work with you, the buyer broker, and you're making me sign forms, here's what's not clear about that. What if I don't like you and I want to go to another broker and I sign a form with them? If I see the same house, I decide that now I'm going to move first, who gets the commission? There's still, I think, a lot of ambiguity and a lot of unintended, unaddressed consequences as a result of this litigation and pending settlement. The agreements also have to disclose compensation details. They prohibit exorbitant commissions or compensation fee structures, and they have to state that these fees are negotiable. So just because you have a buyer broker that is going to rep you as a buyer, you have the ability to negotiate whatever fee they say they're going to charge you. So how's that going to impact the business overall? The fees are going to come down. It's going to get a lot more competitive. And the people on the residential side that are the ones that have really made the career out of it, and they're not dabblers, they spend more time at the club, the manicure salon, and the hair salon than they do in the real estate office. Those people are going to go away. It's going to get rid of a lot of part-timers and a lot of people that aren't serious about their career, as it probably should. So I think there is some well-intended measures behind the suit, but commercial has kind of always been in that regard where, for example, I work as a fiduciary. Okay. So if you come to me as a seller, I'm going to represent you as a seller. I'm not going to be a transactional broker where I don't have full disclosure, full transparency. I become more of a slave to the transaction than I do to your interests. So I think what will happen is this will force brokers, both on the residential and the commercial side, to be more representative and to act more like fiduciaries to whatever side of the trade they're representing.
So you'd say in all, it's a net negative to the people that are trying to make a quick buck in this industry.
Yeah.
And
Definitely.
It's a net positive to the people that have really invested their blood, sweat, and tears into this industry, and they're going to see, the fruits of their labor with decrease in, I guess, competition in terms of sheer number of agents and brokers out there.
You're 100% right. And on the commercial side, absolutely nothing is going to change.
Yeah.
In fact, I don't recall, because NAR is more along the lines of a residential regulatory or a lobbying group or whatever label you want to put on it. You don't really see that in commercial. And this kind of goes back to what I was saying before, where it's presumed that everybody that's playing, all the actors that role in this theater, know what they're doing. They've been trained. They're either appropriately licensed and experienced. They've made these investments before. There's really no need for the disclosures because it's already presumed that you know what you're doing.
Well, I want to start wrapping this. I want to kind of give you the floor to...
This has been great. I not to interrupt you, but this 55 minutes went by real fast. And I feel like we were just kind of getting started. So,
well, in that case, I'd love to bring you back on.
Happy to do it.
Yeah, we could do another episode and into some more nitty gritty real estate, talk about more of master CRE. I guess before we wrap up, tell me where people can get more information about this new platform you're developing, how they could stay connected with you, and where they can get in touch with you.
Okay. Well, I have the two companies. I'll give you the websites. The one for the brokerage, transaction, and advisory firm, Haute Commercial, is www.hautecre.com, HAUTECRE.com. And the platform, which we just entered our pre-launch stage, where you can go to a one-page parent website to learn all about it. I've got videos posted. I have a list of all of the community benefits that I'm going to be offering. You can find that at www.mastercre.com. You can contact me there. I have links to the website or to my email address, to all my social media platforms. Not hard to find me at all if you choose to look. I'm here, and I would love to hear from anybody and everybody that's getting exposed to this great podcast that you put on.
Awesome. Everybody, go visit Craig. He's a wealth of information, and the fact that he's putting all of this information out, this wisdom out to the public, it means that he's looking at your best interest, which we appreciate. We want to work with people. We want to bring people onto the podcast that have that public good mindset. Greg, you've been a wealth of information. I really appreciate you joining the podcast, and I look forward to having you on more episodes.
It was a thrill and an honor. I can't wait to come back. And if I leave anybody with anything, it's we get what we give. So whatever you're out there, you're giving, you're working, you're trying, you're cranking, keep moving forward. I promise it will come back to you.
Beautiful. All right, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining another episode of the Sip and Scale podcast. We'll see you next time.